The following program is being presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of ALC-TV or the City of Avon Lake.
Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense is a series of shows that feature interviews with interesting people so that we can learn in a clear, concise, and direct way who these folks are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing the Emmy Award-winning writer, journalist, TV broadcaster, wow, the knowledgeable, wise, and wonderful Julie Cooley, Vice President of Corporate and Marketing Communications for the Global Indiana Mills and Manufacturing Company, or the acronym IMMI. Welcome, Julie,
Rudy,
to Common Sense.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Well, to start us off, Julie, why don't you tell us where you were born, where you've lived, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm a native-born Hoosier.
Oh, okay.
Born and raised in Indiana. Went to school at IU,
okay.
Indiana University. And I had the wonderful blessing of being able to also then work and have my career in Indiana so I could stay home.
Okay,
with my family.
That's great. Before you tell us about your career, tell us what was more challenging, your time as a Girl Scout leader or a board member for the Homeowners Association? Both of them must have been challenging.
Yeah, well, I think anybody who has ever dealt with an HOA would say, hands down, an HOA. Now, the Girl Scouts was wonderful. It's rewarding, except camping. That's where it got a little challenging.
Yeah.
But other than that, hands down, HOA was the more difficult.
I could see where that camping might be a little bit difficult. Tell us about the steps you've taken in your career.
In my career, well, as I was ending school, getting my bachelor's degree in journalism,
okay.
I, like a lot of kids, didn't know what I was going to do, and so I started to go into law school and was going to go down that
okay.
path. But I had an internship at a television station before I was going to go to law school.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened then was in Indianapolis, and they hired me. They offered me a job, and I loved what I was doing, and so I stayed that course.
Okay.
And I said, nope, law school can wait if it ever comes. So
okay.
I am thrilled that I kept on that course because it's been very, very fun.
What was the most challenging position you had?
Probably being being a producer of news, executive producer
okay.
of news. There's just a lot of challenges with that in the sense of, you tell a lot of difficult stories.
Understand.
And you, on one hand, you meet incredible people, you tell great stories, but then there's also the hard ones. And, that's, I think, probably the most challenging.
What sparked your interest in pursuing a career in communications, public relations? Did you have a role model or anything like that?
At the time, I would probably say Jane Pauley. I
okay.
thought she was just, she was
fantastic.
She was fantastic. She was a maverick. She was a forerunner. I loved to watch Barbara Walters, her interviews when I was a kid. Those one-on-one interviews.
All
I thought
right.
those were fascinating. And then, of course, I know this is a bit irreverent, but Johnny Carson, to me, was also an incredible interviewer. Yeah. And so I loved, anything like that, as well as 60 Minutes. Those were really what got me more interested in communications and television. Yes.
What surprised you about these activities?
I would say the personalities.
Okay.
A lot of times you see somebody on camera and you say, oh, they're just so wonderful, aren't they amazing? And then they would be like, yes, but they're a little difficult. You have the personalities, like for those who know the Mary Tyler Moore Show, you have the Ted Baxters, all characters, all great people, but that's probably been.
Was there anybody that stuck out in your mind as being particularly interesting?
Listen,
You've met a lot of people.
I have met a lot of people, and every single one in their own way is fascinating.
Okay.
I mean, between, of course, you have the senators, and I had the good fortune to travel to Russia with Senator Lugar when he was
Wow.
working on, helping disarm after the Cold War, so that
Okay.
those weapons didn't fall into the hands of terrorists.
Wow.
And so he was just fascinating. And so then,
Okay.
of course, other celebrities and stuff. So it was really
Okay.
neat.
What are the qualities of a good communicator?
I would say really integrity. Tell the truth.
Yeah.
Tell the truth. People can handle it. Don't spin it. Don't be, try to be indirect. Just
Okay.
And if you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer. There's,
Okay.
But I think that that's something that I wish we had more of. Just
Okay.
authenticity, integrity. Tell the truth.
Okay. And I like that about you.
Yeah.
What kinds of safety products does IMMI design, test, and manufacture? And throw in what Safeguard is.
I sure will. Okay, so IMMI is a 62-year-old safety company. If you think everything except we provide seatbelts, airbags, steering wheels, advanced safety products, and everything except automobiles.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be school buses, car seats. IMMI was the first one, which was amazing. You'd never believe this, in a little Westfield, Indiana, to come up with the 5-point harness for car seats.
Okay.
In fact, and I tell a lot of people, I say, you know what, I bet either your kids or your grandkids or even you were protected by IMMI's 5-point harness, because we have all between Graco, Britex, all the major car seat manufacturers. Also, fire apparatus, fire trucks, ambulances, heavy duty trucks, so your semi trucks, your FedEx trucks, your UPS trucks, and then your military, which is a huge blessing to be able to protect the military as well. And then, of course, school buses and seatbelts on school buses.
Okay. Why did your company focus on seatbelts and seats for school buses?
For school buses. So this is a great story. So we were held by a first-generation family, the Anthony family.
Okay.
And Dick Anthony started and founded the company, and then second generation, his son, Tom, took over probably about 25 years ago. And they had twin daughters, he and his wife. And the first day that they put their daughters on a school bus, she was shocked that there were no seatbelts on that school bus.
Me too.
Yes, I think most parents are. So she followed that school bus all the way to school to make sure her daughters got there, came home and told Tom, said, that we need to do something about this.
Yeah.
And that's been, over 25 years ago. And so IMMI began that journey. And this is what I loved about IMMI. There were no customers, there were no school bus manufacturers saying, we need these. There were no school districts asking for it. It was one of those investments that they knew they needed to make for the protection of kids.
Yeah, satisfy need.
Yes.
Even before people recognized it.
That's right.
How many of the typical large yellow school buses are operating in the United States?
I think roughly about 500,000.
Okay.
Give or take.
All right.
Give or take. The large ones.
A lot of buses.
That's a lot of buses. Yes.
How many of these school buses do you think have some kind of seatbelts?
So we estimate probably about 25%.
Okay.
And that's because of the states that have mandated them, the larger states. So California mandates, New York, well, that's lap belts only, but that still counts as having a belt.
Understand.
Florida, Texas, so a lot, the larger states.
Okay.
So it's probably about 25%.
Okay. Are lap shoulder belts that are found in cars better protection than the old lap belts?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no question. And you know that. Lap belts were meant to prevent ejection.
Yeah.
And they did. But it was lap shoulder belts that the reason that we moved to those is because in 50% of all vehicles, when you have a lap and shoulder belt, it reduces injury and death by 50%.
Okay.
That's key, and that's all the research. So that's why automotive then moved to lap shoulder belts, as did most vehicles.
Understand. What is the Center for Advanced Product Evaluation, otherwise known as CAPE?
As CAPE, yes. This is an incredible facility at IMMI, and our owners built this in 1998 because they recognized, since we were in the industry of commercial vehicles and providing seatbelts and airbags, that there was really no test facility to prove these out. And so they built CAPE. And it's amazing. It's the leading test facility for semi-trucks, fire apparatus, school buses. We do military work there. We do some automotive there, definitely car seats. So it's an incredible facility that really...
I think people are going to be seeing the video of a bus crash.
Yes.
That's research conducted by CAPE.
Yes, and it's interestingly, we do have, we do testing for Europe too. So those crash dummies that you see, they're instrumented, but they're to be maintained and make sure that, they meet all federal regulations, so that when we're doing the research for that, it's standard for FMVSS.
Okay.
And even in Europe.
Right. And what was that law that you mentioned, or the standard F?
Oh, the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards.
Oh, okay. Now, I know in the video there's shown a crash, and then some of the crashes that have been staged by, I should say demonstrated by CAPE. They take place at speeds of 30 or 35 miles an hour, which is a pretty moderate speed. And you could imagine if the speed was higher.
That's right. That's right. And most people don't realize, they think, well, that's just going in the neighborhood. If it's 25, 30 miles an hour, that's not that fast, until you see the energy of the force of an impact and a crash and what that does. And so from a school bus standpoint and school bus seating, CAPE has tested more school buses, crash tested more school buses and tested more school bus seats than anyone in the world combined, including the government.
Okay. Are the current federally mandated school bus safety features without seat belts adequate to protect children fully, regardless of the type of crash?
No. So compartmentalization. So compartmentalization was, it's really saying that protects in a frontal and in a rear accident in a school bus. And it assumes that the child is in their compartment in that seat, seated perfectly, in position. And then if there's a frontal impact, the child will stay in the compartment. And that was developed back in the 70s, I believe, which, if you can imagine, if we never advanced safety in our automobiles for 50 years, can you imagine? But yet that's what we are still relying on in school buses. And they're carrying our kids. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but yes, so that's compartmentalization, but in a rollover, or if it's a T-bone, or any kind of side impact, and even an oblique, which an oblique means that it's not perfectly frontal, but it's...
Understand.
Then no, it's not adequate to just compartmentalization to depend on that alone.
What amazes me is it's supposed to be a safety theory that the child hitting the seat in front of them is protective. Well, I can imagine a child hitting the seat in front of them at 35 miles an hour with their faces would be pretty traumatic for a child.
And that's exactly right, Rudy. That's not when they say that there's 17,000 injuries on a school bus a year, roughly. That's what the American Pediatric Association has estimated. They don't count concussions, broken noses as a major injury unless the child is unconscious when the EMTs arrive on the scene. So those are being deemed right now as minor injuries. That's how they're being recorded and qualified. Well, we know so much about concussions. Those are not minor.
Right.
And so yes, when the child's head hits the seat, it's a violent form of safety.
Right.
Really, it's passive and it's violent.
It's
or can be.
It's not meant to prevent injuries.
Yes. I mean, unless it's a complete frontal and it's I mean, it can lose a tooth. Or a nose. Interestingly, we had a lady that works for IMMI. Her sister 5 years ago when she was in high school, a 15 mile an hour, she was on the school bus. 15 miles an hour, this other teenager was going, hits the school bus from the side. She
went
sideways, goes into the side, concussed.
2
months it took her to recovery. to fully recover. And so, that's why no compartmentalization. I mean, and it's only 15-mile-an-hour crash does not protect adequately in many events.
Okay. About how many children are killed or injured as passengers in school bus incidents? You mentioned 17,000.
Injuries, yes.
Injuries.
Okay, so statistically, I believe NHTSA would say probably from like 4 to 6 children a year is what they, which isn't one.
Terrible.
Isn't one too much? I
Yeah.
know. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had a situation here in Clark County where a boy was ejected from a bus after a crash,
Right.
and it was a fatality. It was really terrible. Are seat belts effective at preventing children's injuries? Are they effective?
Absolutely. The same question, why do we insist that they are buckled up from day one when they come home from the hospital?
Yeah.
Because they save lives.
Yeah.
And that, when I first got into the safety business at IMMI, I never would have thought for 1 minute that a seatbelt on a school bus would be a controversial, providing a seatbelt.
I don't understand it.
Would be controversial.
Yeah.
I thought, and I couldn't believe, I've been at IMMI now 11 years, and that there still are pockets and groups that believe, the school bus is the safest vehicle. Correct, it is the safest vehicle, statistically.
Right.
However, can't we make them safer?
Yeah, right. Enhance the safety.
Enhance it. These school buses are going 65 miles an hour down our highways right now with semi-trucks.
Right.
To 2 hours down to field trips and athletic events. It's not just mailbox to mailbox anymore, and that there's any controversy or any kind of I don't know. Anyway, it just boggles my mind how that can even be an issue. Why a school bus would not have 3-point lap shoulder belts. And I don't just say that because I'm in the industry. It's because of what I've seen, what I know, the research. Mm-hmm. It's just,
You've seen a lot of demonstrations.
I've seen
of
so
crashes.
many demonstrations. And, it's like with Texas. I don't know if you remember that fatal accident. It was probably about 5 years ago, maybe. And that's when Texas, they did have a lap shoulder belt law on the books, but it really didn't have any teeth.
Right.
Because it said, well, if the school district can't afford it, well, then don't worry about seatbelts. They had a fatality in Houston. I think a couple children, unfortunately, died. And, of course, the school bus driver walked out of the hospital that night because the school bus driver had a lap shoulder belt.
Right.
And after that, then Texas put some meat into their laws and mandated that all new school buses have to have lap shoulder belts. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't have taken that.
Yeah, it's sad. I think they're seeing another video of a simulation where, you see how effective the seat belts are.
That's right.
What is the cost of putting lap shoulder seat belts in a new school bus, and how does that generally break down over the lifetime of a bus?
So the cost of a bus can be about $110,000, $125,000. Lap shoulder belt, put all the seats with lap shoulder belts in there, it's about $7,000 to $10,000.
Okay.
Life of the bus, about 12 years, 10 years, 12 years. So we've broken that down, and it's really about $5 per student per year. And I know that that's been a lot of cost, school districts will say it's about cost. But then I've seen school districts that choose Wi-Fi at $5,000 a year to be on their bus versus seatbelts, or
the Jumbotron.
A new stadium and the Jumbotron, and those are
yeah.
But it's a matter of priorities, with the
have
districts.
Yeah,
but it's really, but the point is, really, seatbelts are not that expensive. And if you have, there are certain buses that if you have 2012 and later, all you have to do is swap the backs, because we had engineered a seat that all you have to do is swap the back if you want to go to a lap shoulder belt.
Okay.
And that cost then is cut in half.
Okay.
So you can convert old buses if you have the convertible seats like that.
Okay, understand, and it'd certainly be worthwhile. Why are school districts reluctant to put seatbelts in their new school buses? You've mentioned cost is an item, sure, certainly. Are there other items that school districts recognize and that prevent them from putting the belts in?
So there's been a lot of different excuses over the, and I call them excuses because we've heard that school districts won't do it because the students can't evacuate in an accident.
Okay.
Well, these are federally mandated lap and shoulder belts.
Right.
It's very easy to push the button to get out, whether you are upside down or whether, I mean, they're designed, you know, just like to release in your car. And then an uninjured child will evacuate a bus a lot faster than an injured child.
Right.
So they say that. The other thing is, they'll be used as weapons. Well, I would challenge anybody to go out to your car and figure out how you can use a 3-point seatbelt as a weapon. So we've heard that as well. And then, of course, cost. We hear that excuse as well.
Okay. I've also heard that school bus drivers are concerned about liability, that if the child isn't wearing the seatbelt and they have an accident. Is that real, or is that just a figment of the imagination?
I think, I think that's a figment too, because the district will protect the bus driver as far as their insurance goes. But the other thing is, the bus driver cannot clearly go back and monitor every single person. But if the school system has a usage policy where if they see that the child continues to not be buckled up, and we have a lot of districts that have done a fantastic job with a usage policy, they're written up. You get about a few write-ups. The next thing you know, your parents have to
drive you to school.
Or say, okay, Johnny's going to put his seatbelt on because he's going to continue to ride the bus. This, we've talked about this at home, but and this is unacceptable.
I could see how that household dynamics would work. What is the best approach to convince school districts to start putting seat belts in their new buses? I know you have a No More Excuses campaign that you started to talk about.
That's right. Well, actually, the bus drivers end up loving the seat belts.
I've seen.
When they're used, because they turn into, the school districts that phase these in, they will put the lap and shoulder belts on their more, let's say, rowdier routes, because it improves behavior. It's a lot harder to bully when you're sitting in your seat and you're restrained, than when you're not.
One of the things I've also heard about is that, and studies have been done by NHTSA, that the driver-caused crashes will drop like a rock. They have frequency when you have seat belts, and that also helps driver retention. And I know that's an issue that's being dealt with right now. We don't have enough drivers, but long term, you have seat belts, your driver retention is going to go up.
That's right, and because of the behavior aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had some studies to show that they improve behavior by 92 to 94%.
Wow. That's
amazing, because you want your bus driver's eyes on the road, not constantly looking up and dealing with behavior problems in the back.
Right. And if you have chaos on the bus, that work environment is not very helpful to keep drivers. They're going to leave that unpleasant atmosphere.
That's exactly right.
Are seatbelts in school buses becoming more popular? Do you see that more districts are biting the bullet and going ahead? And
yes.
I know in Indiana there's...
Yeah, it's been slow, but I will tell you, one of the things that really, I think, got more districts going forward, when NHTSA came out, and this was Mark Rosekind, one of probably the best administrators that NHTSA's ever had, comes out and boldly declares that every child on every school bus should have a 3-point lap shoulder belt.
Yeah.
And that was I'll never forget. I was sitting in the front row at this school bus event, and it was November 8th, 2015.
Okay.
And he staked that position with NHTSA, and between that and the NTSB, the National Safety Council, I mean, you have every major safety agency saying school buses should have lap and shoulder belts.
Yeah.
They save lives. And so I think that that's brought a lot more districts on. As well as, I believe that the generation that's now becoming more in student transportation leadership
Okay.
is the generation that had to be first buckled up when they came home from the hospital.
I got you.
And so I believe that they've just been
Okay.
more in tune to that, because I can just tell you, my generation, I would sit on my parents' sometimes, armrest in the car.
Yeah.
I mean, that was,
Yeah.
and it was a hard conversion for my generation also to go over to, I think, seat belts. And so, so I think this next generation of transportation directors is also helping to move that forward.
Yeah. They have the safety habit.
Yes, yes. It's been ingrained since day one.
Right. Why do school bus drivers, and I think we talked about this a little, resist seat belts installed in their buses? Initially, they resist.
Yeah.
I've experienced that. But then once the seat belts are in, they
Isn't
convert.
that something? They love that. Have you talked to bus drivers
Yeah.
that have said, I don't like it when my bus is out of service because if I don't have lap shoulder belts, I want my lap shoulder belts back as quickly as possible because of the behavior.
Okay.
The implications, it just improves drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And the little kids, I mean, they'll get on the bus, they know to buckle up.
I think up until about the 5th or 6th grade,
Yes.
everybody buckles up, and
Yes.
then the
Yes.
kids are feeling their oats, and
That's right.
they start to give you a little bit of trouble.
But then that goes to the district. I mean, if you have a coach that's taking his high school team 2 hours down the interstate, the coach is riding the bus too. I mean, if anybody can enforce, everybody get your lap shoulder belts on, it's going to be a coach, or it's going to be your band director, or whomever.
Why do seatbelt requirements for school buses continue to die in committee in federal and state legislatures? What are they waiting for? A tragedy and then becoming active?
That's what it feels like. It's just like, I use Texas.
Me too. Yes.
But then you have Iowa that didn't have to have a tragedy and did it, or Nevada that didn't have to have a tragedy.
That's right.
And
I hadn't
so,
thought of that.
it's just,
I know
both
Tennessee
ways.
had this
Yes.
tragedy in Chattanooga
Yes.
where 6
Yes.
died, and they came up with a grant program, I think $3
They
million to
They did.
fund seatbelts in their
For
new
any
buses.
district that wanted those,
Yeah.
they paid the extra. So again, back to no more excuses. Cost then was not an excuse. And yet you didn't have every district, I don't think, in Tennessee taking advantage of that program.
Okay, and they should, certainly.
And they should.
Do you think that mandating seatbelts in school buses will happen eventually in all of the United States?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say I don't. Let me give you an example. I think the industry will somehow come on board and regulate itself, because here's an example, semi-trucks. Did you know that there is no mandate that a semi-truck driver has a 3-point lap and shoulder belt?
Oh, I didn't know that.
The industry brought that on themselves. So they kind of self-regulated.
Okay.
And so I believe that that is what is going to happen. The other reason I say no is because I think federally we had an opportunity to do that. When the government was giving $5 billion away for these electric buses,
Right.
they did not put in there
Oh,
that
would,
you had to have lap shoulder belts, which there would have been your opportunity.
Yeah, that would have been perfect. I believe that Sherrod Brown is going to come out with a bill, hopefully,
Right.
with seatbelts in all new buses,
Right.
all new
And
school
Senator
buses.
Tammy Duckworth, right, of Illinois?
Right. I don't know if that is going to work out. I hope it does.
I do too. I mean, I sure do, but,
because it hasn't worked in the
legislatively,
past.
yes,
Yeah.
legislatively.
Does having seatbelts hurt school bus capacity?
Not at all. And this is, that was another one that initially you had people that were, and I'm sorry to say this, but it was in the education industry. Some school districts, school boards would say, no, that's going to reduce capacity. And we said, no, we'll show you why, because the way the seat is designed, you can either fit 3 small children
Okay.
or 2, because you move your latch, your buckle
Okay.
down
All right.
below. And so it was engineered. And so that when that became oh, okay, we can't use that excuse. Now we're going to go to evacuations, costs, and such.
Other excuses.
And other excuses. Because, Rudy, the funny thing is, had they way back said, you know what, maybe you're right, it does reduce capacity, wink, wink, I think we're going to need to order more buses, the transportation departments would have been then getting a lot more money, which they are usually, they don't receive,
right.
Enough money. They would have had all this, all these school buses, and they would have had a lot of money way back then, but no, it does not reduce capacity.
Okay. Will children wear seat belts when they're available? What rate of compliance would you expect?
Partially, I think that depends on the school district.
Right.
Do they have a usage policy? Will they train students just like they would a fire drill or a tornado drill?
Right.
That's, there's that. But also, like we said, little kids, they immediately know because they've been buckled up
every day. And
every day.
Yeah.
And I think they get on the school bus the first day of kindergarten, and we've seen it where they're looking for their seatbelts.
Where are the seatbelts?
And parents are asking, where are the seatbelts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the seatbelts are available, do improvements in discipline occur? And I think you've already mentioned that. Mm-hmm. Bullying and driver-caused accidents, I would imagine, would decrease. And there are studies that support that.
Right, there are.
Do seatbelts slow emergency evacuations? I think we already covered that.
And then the funny thing is that if you drive up to, go to the parking lot at Kings Island and watch how fast little kids get out and get themselves out of there, whether it's their booster seat or their seat belts, to get into the park.
Okay.
Or Chuck E. Cheese or whatever.
My granddaughter, Mia, she, when I would drive her around, and I think when she was 3 or 4, she would be behind me and in a harness.
Right.
And by the time I would very quickly get out of my seat, she would have half her clothes off and her shoes off.
Ready to go.
And completely
She's
open.
Out. Right. And then, like I said, though, an uninjured child is going to get out of a seatbelt much faster.
And help their classmates.
And help their classmates faster than an injured child who doesn't have a seatbelt.
Now, one of the things that I've heard is that, what happens in a fire? And does crowding occur at exits in a fire? And does that delay evacuations?
Well, I would say, logic would say, if you only have 2 or 3 evacuation points on a bus, your bottleneck is going to be at your door, at your exits.
Right. So
if you have 66 to 72 kids. Yeah.
And, to get out of the seat belt takes a fraction of a second.
Correct.
And then only one person at a time can get through the door.
Correct.
That's where it's going to be a bottleneck, as you said. In a rollover, and I think you've answered this already, will buckles for seat belts easily release, even if the child is hanging upside down?
Yes, easily, with a thumb.
Okay. Is having padded seat backs sufficient to protect children from injury and death in the event of a crash or sudden stop?
Well, that's what is mandated. And so, yes, that's that foam. It's a special kind of, engineered foam, and it's mandated, and so yes. But it will, there could be injuries.
Yeah, and there are failures, especially if you have a side crash or a rollover.
Right. Well, that's then you're out of compartment. Then that's a whole nother deal.
I remember reading a North Carolina study that showed that in a 10-year study that 1/3 of all their crashes in that 10 years were of the rollover or the side crash type. So, that's where the kid has no protection at all.
Right.
Talking to the choir, preaching
I know,
to the choir.
Preaching to the choir.
All right.
And have you seen the video from Ohio, I believe it was, and it was probably maybe 10 years ago, but it was maybe less, on camera, where they had the rollover.
Okay.
That's part of that. I think that's one of the videos that we have. But, it's a violent
yeah.
crash, and it's a hard point of the bus, where.
Right, and in the
hitting.
simulation that the
Right.
video has been shown, there's one part where the neck of one of the dummies is turned completely over,
Right.
and your neck is not meant
No.
to do that. Why hasn't NHTSA formally mandated seatbelts for school buses?
Well, then the government would have to fund it.
I
So
see.
if you think about it, back in 2016, they said that all new motor coaches will have to have lap shoulder belts on them,
Right.
like Greyhound. But, that was private. Motor coaches are private. So if you're
Right.
going to do this in the public sector, then they will have to fund it.
I got you.
The government will have to fund it, not NHTSA,
Understand.
yes.
Understand. Now, this information is going to appear on the bottom of the screen. Where is IMMI located?
In Westfield, Indiana, which is about 40 minutes or so north of Indianapolis.
Okay, I've been there.
I know.
Okay. How can someone get in touch with you or IMMI? Is there a telephone number?
Yeah, or
a
you
general
can,
one? Or
there's a
you
general
have a
one, or you
website
can-
too?
We have a website, right, imminet.com.
Okay.
Or safeguardseat.com. And so I know you asked me about just the difference between Safeguard. Safeguard is actually the brand of our school bus seat. That's the name of it.
I got
Safeguard.
you. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they could get a hold of me by Cooley at imminet.com.
Okay. And do you have the number?
Yes, 317-867-8363.
Okay. Well, in summary, I always ask this question: what makes sense to you and what doesn't? And I know there's a lot that doesn't, but pick one out.
Okay, what makes sense to me? Seat belts, because they protect. We should all be buckling up.
Right.
It makes sense, it saves lives. That's the important thing. What doesn't make sense, we have just spent the last hour discussing. What doesn't make sense is that every school bus does not have a lap shoulder belt on it, protecting our kids.
Agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on
Rudy, thank
Common
you so
Sense.
much for having me. It's been
Okay.
a pleasure.
It's,
and thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, this is
Well, I
amazing
try
to
my
protect
best.
children. It's just, it's just wonderful.
It's a work of love. So
Absolutely.
I want to protect those kids. And we're the adults,
I know. I know.
Well, thank you very much for watching. Please give us feedback on the show. Or you can send comments or questions to the email addresses that appear at the bottom of the screen. Please let me know if you have, of interesting people. Just send us their contact information and we'll pursue it. And again, remember, seatbelts save lives.
The preceding program was presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.